Hello and welcome to the Musical Instrument Investigator. Today we're on the website of Amati Auctions based in the UK, and we're going to have a look at one of their latest auctions. So it seems that Amati have a double auction that they've just released the catalogue for. One of them is ending on the 24th of August. That's what we're going to have a look at in this video, and then the next one will end on the 25th of August, so the day afterwards, and we're going to have a look at that auction in another video. So you see here day one, this is one finishing on the 24th. This is a single owner collection from a private London collector, and it seems to be 179 items. I think it's mainly violins and a few bows, but there are some other bits in between. And then the second day is the maker's sale and instruments from the estate of Julian Emery. So that's kind of stuff for making instruments and parts of instruments, but we're just going to have a look at this single owner collection today. Looks like the buyer's premium is 22%. Obviously this is a UK based auction, so kind of check all the terms and conditions, shipping and kind of import export, and if there's any restrictions, CITES, etc, etc. And yeah, without further ado, let's just have a look at these first kind of 179 items that are finishing on the 24th of August. So it's mid-August at the time of recording this video, so you've got plenty of time, and I'll put a link in the description. So yeah, let's see what we have here. So we have a 3/4 size cello, unlabeled. You can see that we have the condition reports up already, so always worth checking that out. I think this is the only cello actually in this auction. Might actually be the only cello in both of the days, I can't quite remember, but definitely on this one. Violin unlabeled. Let's have a look at this. Kind of interesting wood choice in the back there. Yeah, that's kind of a fairly interesting looking violin. Another violin unlabeled. I think most of these are probably unlabeled. Interesting crackleture on the varnish there, and all the way on the back. Yeah, and on the scroll, another kind of fairly interesting looking violin. Let's just have a quick look at the measurements. Length of back 350. Interesting. Violin labelled Antonius Stradivarius, Wilhelm Cruz, Mark Nikirkin. Once again, a fairly interesting back. So a few kind of, nothing is really screaming at me so far, but not too bad. This is another one, needs a bit of repair there. It's a violin labelled Nicholas Armatus, that's a bit more kind of normal. Violin labelled Theodore Berger. Nothing too outrageous there. 3/4 size violin labelled The School Violin, Rushworth and Draper. Pretty standard kind of thing. 3/4 size violin, the Maidstone. We know these are just kind of pretty low end kind of trade things. Violin labelled Antonius Stradivarius. This again looks fairly normal. Violin labelled Antonius Stradivarius again. Yep, another much of the same. Violin unlabeled. That looks very tradey. So this London collector collected a lot of stuff, most of which is not looking too inspiring. Once again, that's another tradey. The first few kind of items, they were a bit more interesting. Here's a standard trade violin. Big crack on the front there. It says Conservatory Violin Stradivarius on the back of the scroll. That's a typical kind of German trade violin, half-size violin here. More of the same, half-size violin, unlabelled. In fine condition there. Looks interesting. I wonder if that's kind of like a Hungarian type thing or a Czech thing. Completely speculative, of course, but has that kind of vibe. Another kind of trade violin there. Medifino. This is kind of your French kind of low kind of tier violin. I think they can sound alright for kind of people starting off. Violin labelled Beers and Son, 140 bid on that already, that's popular. Looks like quite a well made violin, labelled Barzoni. Violin labelled Nicholas Armatus. Looks fairly much the same. Violin labelled Gabriel Lembach. This looks very messed around with. Extensive damage throughout. Looks like the front has been kind of re-varnished or something. It's a bit of a horrible mess. 7/8 size violin labelled Dollings. It's again just another kind of tradey instrument there. Violin labelled copy of Medjini. Another pretty standard one there. Violin unlabelled. Let's have a look at this. Once again, some interesting kind of crackleture there, but not seeing anything too much. Violin labelled Zimmermann. Pretty standard there. Violin labelled F. Breton. Yeah, I see a lot of these kind of instruments around. Violin unlabelled. Looks a little bit more interesting than some of the others, but still not quite sure. Violin unlabelled. Interesting. Violin labelled Frank Reiner, 1924. Some varnish issues there. Let's get rid of this important notice. 3/4 size violin, unlabelled. Yep, fairly similar again. Violin branded Nicholas Bertolini. Looks like another standard trade violin there. Violin label Jean Baptiste Schweitzer. This is your kind of another trade violin. That one's quite a nasty looking one. Violin unlabelled. Interesting F holes there. Kind of interesting, strong, bit of an oddity. Looks like a kind of trade type violin from the back, but the front is a little bit odd. Violin labelled Leon Paroche. Another standard looking instrument there. 3/4 Maidstone. We know the deal with these. I think most of them were made in Germany, but I think there are some that are French, just workshop instruments. Violin labelled Stradivarius. This is pretty nasty kind of looking trade violin. Violin labelled Nicholas Armatus. Once again, nothing too crazy there. Violin labelled Antonio Stradivarius. Okay, that's slightly more interesting back, some kind of odd varnish going on there. Okay, slightly different. What's the 355 length of back? Okay. Violin labelled Petrus Guarnerius. Interesting F holes again. Not really seeing anything super crazy there. 359. Violin labelled Stradivarius again. A lot of this stuff is pretty uninspiring so far. Violin unlabelled, but then this is a kind of general sale. Yeah, that is just another trade violin. Violin unlabelled. Okay. Three-quarter, labelled Thomas Craig. This game looks pretty standard. Violin labelled H. Clotel. Another standard looking thing. Violin labelled Magini. Yep, very not particularly nice trade instrument there. Another Strad labelled instrument here. Just looks like another trade violin, another one with the concert on the back of the scroll. Violin labelled Nicholas Armatus. Yep, nothing too exciting there. Violin labelled School Violin, Rushworth and Draper, sorry. Saw one of these already, these are not very nice. Violin unlabelled. Okay. This is slightly more interesting looking. A bit open there. Just some of the way the scroll is, some of the varnish. Slightly more interesting than some of the other things that we've seen. Cut of the F-holes. It's the length of back on that. 354. Okay. That one is a bit more interesting. Violin unlabelled. It's just another not particularly nice violin. Violin unlabelled. Once again, nothing too super exciting, although there are interesting kind of these F-hole kind of scoopings here are quite interesting, but you do see that sometimes. Another Strad labelled violin. Another much more of the same, violin unlabelled. I mean, a lot of these are just going to be your average trade violins, same with that really. Sometimes it's quite hard to tell. Violin labelled, what is it, Jean Baptiste Allo. It looks fairly normal. Definitely has that kind of French thing about it. Violin unlabelled. Looks pretty normal again. Oh, we've got Viola here. Interesting. That is a pretty normal trade viola there. Another viola actually labelled C.A. Gotts Jr. I didn't realise there was actually any violas in this auction. This just looks like a kind of modern trade instrument there. 3/4 size violin labelled Joseph Guarnerius. Interesting scroll in a way, but otherwise. Violin labelled Gebruder Wolf. Just more kind of trade violin there. Violin unlabelled. Yep, more of the same. Violin unlabelled. Yep, pretty standard. Another one with a Strad label, although it's got kind of Guarneri-esque F-holes. Violin unlabelled. It's definitely a trade violin, but you see it's got quite heavy scooping on the kind of F-hole wings as well. Violin branded Conservatory, so this is pretty standard. It looks like the majority of this person's collection is pretty normal. It's a JTL 3/4 violin. Nothing too much there. Violin unlabeled. Once again, nothing too much there. Violin unlabeled again. Violin unlabeled. Half-size violin labeled copy de Stradivarius. Violin unlabeled. Violin labeled A. Osmanek Schonbach. Interesting looking back on that. It's had some repairs. Let's have a quick look at the thing. Yeah, there's been some kind of issues here with the F holes, a few closed and a few open cracks. Violin labelled Mr. A. Bittner. Three-quarter size violin labelled Stradivarius. Another similar looking thing. Violin labelled Stradivarius again. That is a lot of horrible things going on there. It's another three-quarter violin here. It's got a Schmidt & Co label there. Three-quarter sized, labelled Wilhelm Herwig. It looks in okay condition, that one. Let's just see what it says. Big crack there at the front, but otherwise not terrible. Violin unlabeled. Looks like a big soundpost crack on the back. Let's just quickly see. I don't mention anything, but you can see it could be just a scratch, but it's in an unfortunate position there. Violin labelled Antonio Stradivarius. Early indications are this collector was not necessarily a collector of anything good, unfortunately. It's a violin labelled Stradivarius. A few things which look halfway intriguing. Violin labelled Stradivarius. Yeah, once again, pretty normal. Three-quarter violin Stradivarius. Violin labelled El Tesoro. Another kind of trade violin, at least the back looks quite nice. Another Maidstone here, lots of those floating about. Violin labelled Joseph Guarneris. So look at that one, it's got Guarneri type F holes, but it's another trade violin there with that kind of old style of antiquing. Another Strad labelled violin. It's a bit of an odd looking thing. It looks very tradey. Three-quarter size violin unlabelled. Violin labelled Francois Barzoni. Ooh, zoomed in a bit much there. Another kind of trade violin. Violin unlabelled. Violin labelled JTL. Three-quarter size violin, Strad label. Violin with an indistinct label. Violin unlabelled. This is all very similar kind of stuff, very much your normal violin branded clots. It's all just different variations of trade violins, another Strad labelled instrument, violin unlabelled. Be nice if you can see something a bit more interesting. It's not coming forward so far. Another violin unlabelled. A violin unlabelled. It's pretty bizarre F holes here, and the corners pretty odd. It's interesting. Looks like a kind of German mountain kind of region instrument. Kind of curious looking though. Might be an interesting violin for like a kind of Baroque or classical setup. Not sure what it would actually sound like, but you know, it has some quirky charm in any case. What's the length of back? 352. So interesting. Another 3/4. It's a Strad label. Violin labelled Sebastian Klotz in Mittenwald. It's had some work done to it. Violin labelled Stradivarius. That's got an absolutely horrendous crack on the front. That is absolutely terrible. Yeah, look at that, gigantic. Violin labelled Nicholas Armatus. Yeah. Violin labelled Nicholas Armatus again. Just more tradey stuff. Violin labelled Antonius Stradivarius. That's another good crack there. That's more trade violins. Violin unlabelled. Okay. Violin unlabelled again. We are seeing a good spectrum of trade instruments here. Violin labelled, made by Peter Walmsley. Okay. That I think just looks like a fiddled about instrument a bit, but hard to say. It's a little bit different to some of the others, but I'm not really convinced. Violin labelled, imported by Leslie Shepherd. Violin with a Strad label. Violin unlabelled. Violin labelled Stradivarius. Violin unlabelled. Three-quarter size violin, Strad label. Violin unlabelled here. Okay, once again this looks like the kind of German type instrument, that kind of mountain kind of region with the painted purfling. Once again could be interesting for a kind of classically Baroque setup on a budget. Violin labelled D. Soriot. Half-size violin, unlabelled. Violin labelled Emil Horth. Looks pretty standard there. Three-quarter size violin, unlabelled. Missing its eye. Violin unlabelled. This looks like kind of nice amateur work, interesting shape. Three-quarter size violin, unlabelled. unlabeled. It's kind of interesting with the inked purfling. The scroll. What's the length of back on that? 359. See what the some open seams in places. Violin unlabeled. Three-quarter size violin unlabeled. Violin unlabeled. Violin unlabeled. Violin with a repairer's label there. Not seeing anything too crazy in that one. Another violin unlabeled. Violin labelled Stradivarius. Violin labelled Untitled Tone Production. Interesting, quite a nice back to it. Violin labelled Stradivarius. Another kind of fiddled about kind of trade violin, I think. Violin unlabelled. It's got a few cracks going on there. Violin labelled Stradivarius. Violin labelled Stradivarius. Three-quarter size violin, another Maidstone. Violin labelled Wolf Brothers. That's definitely been messed around with. Violin labelled W.E.D. Voigt Jr. Violin labelled Manufactured in Berlin. It's also been messed around with a bit. Violin labelled Antonius Stradivarius. I think we're coming towards the end of the violins soon. Another three-quarter violin with a Maidstone label. Violin labelled F. Barb. Slightly interesting shape to this in the filler on the treble side, so it's interesting. And the overall shape of this and the kind of F-hole placement just reminds me a little bit of some of the Nicolas Ain kind of French violins, so you know, it's fairly interesting. I wonder what the length of back is. 357, it's quite long, so it's a bit different to some of the other bits in any case. Violin labelled a Manier Luthier. Okay. Violin unlabelled. Violin labelled the Apollo. It's another Rushworth and Draper imported thing. Violin labelled Dulcis at Fortis. Violin unlabelled. Violin labelled Stradivarius. Violin labelled the Maidstone. A bit different to some of the other Maidstones that we've seen. Violin unlabelled. Violin unlabelled again. Violin unlabelled. Violin labelled Joseph Guarnerius. Just another trade violin, I think. 4 violins. I have a collection of things here. Let's have a look at the pictures. 2, 3 and 4, all kind of trade looking instruments there. Another 4 violins. They're really going to town on this. Yeah, it's all pretty tradey looking. Another 4 violins here. Yeah, this is all just kind of not very inspiring kind of stuff. Another 4 violins, why not? Once again, more of the same. Oh, another 4. Wow, they're really chucking them in this auction. It's not a lot to see. Oh, we've got another 4. This may be slightly more interesting than some of the other things we've seen. It's kind of interesting red varnish and just some of the cut of the F holes. That's slightly more curious. Everything else though, not very interesting at all. Another 4 violins. Wow, it continues. Oh, that's had a varnish problem and it's taken most of the case with it. Interesting pink fluff on it. Okay. Oh, we've got more. I lied, there are way more violins left than I remembered. There's quite a lot of things going on. It's interesting that the head is covered on that. That's a bit strange. Does it say anything about that? It's kind of odd. Another 4 violins. Okay. Oh, still more. Wow. These are all very, very similar type things. Yeah. Oh, more. Ooh, more. Wow. Okay. I really did not realise that there were so many of these kind of bundles of violins in this auction. A lot more than I expected. Some more pretty normal looking things here. That's some horrible stuff in there. Ah, finally onto a bow. Nickel mounted violin bow, branded GOTS. Okay. Some good pictures there. Nickel mounted violin bow, unbranded. A silver mounted violin bow, branded G Cone. £70 bid on that already. Good pictures there of the bows. Yeah, it looks quite an interesting bow. Silver mounted violin bow, branded I think that's meant to say Finkel rather than Finked. But, little typos here and there. Yeah, it looks like a kind of Finkel type bow. Usually pretty good. Nickel mounted violin bow, branded Knopf. Nickel mounted violin bow, unbranded. Silver mounted violin bow, unbranded. Let's have a look at that. interesting stick there. That's quite an interesting looking bow. And that one, double bass bow, unbranded. This is an interesting bow actually, personally. This is like a dragonetti style bass bow, which you don't see that often, so I think that one's a curious one. 10 violin bows of various lengths. Let's see what we can see. It looks all fairly standard. Let's move on. Another 10 violin bows. Let's see. It looks all fairly normal. Another 10 violin bows. 10 violin bows again. Let's get nothing too crazy, I don't think. 10 violin bows varying length again. Interesting frogs. Another 10 violin bows. Get quite a lot of bows going on. 12 violin bows, varying length. I'm going to say we've got another picture somewhere. Okay. 10 violin bows again. Ooh. 13 violin bows, various lengths. I think this is the last lot in this part, and I think if we went to the next lot it would be the start. So these are all finished on the 24th, and I think the next one would be, yeah, for the 25th. So we're going to leave that for another time. So yeah, essentially that is the auction of things finishing on the 24th. The majority of it, 99%, is very much just trade stuff and not really too much to see. There's a few things that are a little bit kind of, you know, maybe potentially interesting on the violin front. Nothing outrageous, so I don't think, but a few that might be slightly curious. Bows, there's a couple of bows that look kind of a little bit worth kind of investigating if you're into bows. And yeah, that's about it. So this is the auction for the 24th. I'll put a link in the description. Look out for the video of the second part of the auction, which I'll upload probably in a few days. So that's kind of mainly wood and parts for violin making and some kind of half finished violins, which will be an interesting auction. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching, and I'll catch you next time. Ciao. Many thanks for tuning in to the Musical Instrument Investigator. I hope that you enjoyed the video. If you did, then please like, subscribe and turn on notifications, and watch out for the next video coming soon.